Hello and welcome to Frost Over the World, a particularly packed programme full of interesting people this week. Later in the programme, for instance, Oscar-winning actor Geoffrey Rush, at the top of his form at the moment, Pakistani cricketer turned politician Imran Khan, and 4 years on from their daughter's tragic disappearance, I'll be talking to Kate and Jerry McCann. But first, Palestine. In a surprise announcement last week, the rival Palestinian factions, Hamas and Fatah, signed a unity deal to declare that they will form an interim government to run both Gaza and the West Bank. As we heard here on the programme last week, Israel rejected that deal and said that it would never negotiate with the new government unless Hamas was prepared to change its policy 3 major ways towards Israel. So, what is the deal for Fatah? Are they right to do it? I'm joined now from Ramallah by a key member of Fatah's Central Committee, Saeb Erekat. Saeb, the last time we talked, you said you'd resign if the leaks from the Palestine papers came from your office, and people said that yes, they did, and you did resign. What is your official title really today?
I resigned from the Negotiations Affairs Department as head of the Negotiation Affairs Department. But President Abbas and my colleagues retained me as the head of the negotiation, chief negotiator. That's my title. I'm still a member of the Executive Committee of the PLO, and also a member of the Central Committee of Fatah, which both have been elected to. And along with my representing Jericho and the Jordan Valley in our Parliament, Legislative Council. Has
the reaction been as positive as you would have hoped or as negative as you feared?
Well, I think from all quarters in the world, I think the response was as we expected, because people know that if we want to aim for achieving the two-state solution in a peace process, this cannot be done without reconciliation, without Gaza and the West Bank being a single territorial unit. If we aim to achieve democracy through ballot boxes and not bullets, we cannot do any elections without reconciliation. So there is, people understand that it's the most paramount interest for the Palestinians, and we urge people to stand shoulder to shoulder with us in order for us to have this reconciliation, because it will strengthen our position in the peace process and strengthen our positions in building our future democratic institutions. Unfortunately now, the sole exception for all of this, I would not say Israel, I would say the Israeli government, because many in Israel welcomed the reconciliation and demanded a program from the government, for the exception of the Prime Minister and his cabinet, Mr. Netanyahu, who totally objected to the reconciliation. I think the reasons is that he wants to find pretext to undermine President Abbas, to undermine Salam Fayyad, to undermine Saeb Erekat. Before the reconciliation, he was telling people, who shall I make peace with? Gaza or the West Bank? How can I make peace with Palestinians while they're divided? So this was his pretext in order not to accept the terms of reference. Now his pretext is that how can I make peace while Palestinians reconcile? And Abu Mazen, President Abbas in his speech in Cairo, identified that we will be committed to the one authority, one gun, the rule of law. My government will accept the two-state solution, renounce violence, recognize Israel. And irrespective of all of this, Mr. Netanyahu insists that as long as there is reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, he cannot have peace, and we will not have peace. And not only that, they withheld our revenues. Because we're under occupation, the Israeli occupying power collect taxes for us from our people. They take 3% charge on it, and now they deny that it's transferred to us. So they began the collective punishment and the undermining of the Palestinian Authority before even the government is formed.
And Saeb, in terms of the situation now, how long do you think this unity, pact as it were, between Hamas and Fatah will last? Is this a plan forever, or for 10 years, or until next week?
The deal here is that, okay, we're not asking Hamas to join Fatah, and Hamas should not ask Fatah to join Hamas, we're not going to change our mind, those of us like me, who's a Fatah member, who believe in a two-state solution, who believe in laissez-faire economics, who believe in full women's right, who believe in democracy as a basis of our life. And Hamas has its own social program, educational program, with all due respect. I'm not asking them to become like me. They're not asking me to become like them. What we agreed was, we don't resort to bullets. We resort to ballots. And whoever the Palestinian people will choose will be accepted. And I was very happy to hear Mr. Khalid Mash'al in Cairo saying, yes, we will accept and respect the results of the elections. And at the same time, Abu Mazen and our party say, we will accept and respect the results of elections. So now this is the significant development in Palestinian political life that, contrary to what happened in Gaza 4 years ago when Hamas made this coup d'etat by guns, now our differences will only be solved through ballots and not bullets. And this is the basic of Palestinian political life. Palestinians are democratic. We have fully democratic institutions. The whole world knows this. We are 99% literacy rate this year. So I think this is a significant development. It's the most important Palestinian interest now to have this reconciliation succeed for the sake of the two-state solution and peace process and democracy. And I believe the world should stand shoulder to shoulder with us in order to ensure the success of this Palestinian reconciliation.
And now you have the reconciliation, as you put it. The question is, the basic question is, how long do you think it will be, do you hope it will be, before the UN recognizes the new state of Palestine?
Well, that's our next step. Our first option and second option is to negotiate and to achieve the end of occupation by peaceful resolution. Now, the Israeli government of Mr. Netanyahu have closed the doors in our faces to the negotiating room, and they have chosen settlements and not peace. So what we tell the international community, now we want to go to the UN, the Security Council, and ask for admittance of the state of Palestine on 67 lines to live side by side in peace and security with the state of Israel, which we have recognized. And we'll urge them to admit Palestine on the 67 lines with East Jerusalem as its capital. We know that the Security Council does not recognize state. It will have to approve it and transfer it to the General Assembly. We're asking the Americans who are saying this is a unilateral step. Why this is a unilateral step? This is not a unilateral step. The General Assembly has 192 nations. Israel was admitted to the UN on the condition of accepting the Palestinian state. We're not asking to undermine Israel. We're asking to live in peace and security next to the state of Israel, which we recognize. So we hope that the Americans will not use a veto. And if the Americans were to use a veto for us at the Security Council, we will go to the General Assembly and ask for their recognition to become a non-member state on the 1967 lines, because the Israeli government should not think that it has a veto on my self-determination. It should have a veto in whether we establish a state or not. It should have a veto to continue with the settlement activities dictation rather than negotiations. I don't think the Israeli settlement activities and aggression and siege and closure should be rewarded by the US or any other Western country. It's time for these nations to stand tall and recognize the state of Palestine on 67 lines, to live side by side the state of Israel in peace and security, because that's the only way, that's the only option available for Palestinians and Israelis. That's the only option to live and let live.
Saeed, thank you very much. Goodbye for now, and thank you. And now a story that began in Portugal, but has now almost covered the globe with the headlines. 4 years ago, the story of the apparent abduction of a young British girl swept around the world. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann was taken from the bedroom of the family's holiday apartment in Praia da Luz on Portugal's Algarve coast. Her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, were eating in a nearby restaurant and checking from time to time back at the apartment that all was well. An investigation by Portuguese police was unable to find any trace of Madeleine, and after 15 months the case was all but closed. Reported sightings of the missing girl, though, have in fact been made in at least 14 countries, perhaps more. Today, the case was reopened by London's Scotland Yard Police. Madeleine's parents, who at one point were named as suspects and then later completely cleared, have in fact never given up hope of finding her. And they raised money to fund a worldwide Find Madeleine campaign. To keep that fund going, Kate McCann has written for the first time of the ordeal that the couple have been through. The book is called simply Madeleine. And earlier, Kate and Jerry McCann came here to the studio. It's so good to have you both with us. Tell me, what so far has been the moment when you felt the most hope? The moment when you got information that you really thought might work in finding Madeleine again? When was the time when you were nearest to that moment of hope coming true?
It's a very difficult question, actually. I think there hasn't been a single piece of information where we've felt that's the piece of information that's going to lead us to Madeleine. Some of the negative information has actually been the most hopeful, where the search is not discovering any harm to Madeleine, and actually I think Kate would probably say that when we really saw the files and the lack of evidence of harm to Madeleine, despite the searches which were done, I think that's probably the most important.
And yes, after you.
I mean, obviously there's been many sightings that have been phoned into the investigation team, and generally we try not to let ourselves get too hopeful about them. And obviously Madeleine can't be in a million different places. It's hard not occasionally to get a little bit optimistic. However, on the whole, as Jerry said, there's been no real lead that we feel has taken us very close to Madeleine. And
does the fact that, as the use of the present tense in your book, the fact that you're confident that Madeleine is still alive and so on, does that make it easier or perhaps more difficult to cope with that situation when there is hope but there's uncertainty? Does that make things more difficult to live with?
It's obviously vital for us to have hope,
yeah.
And although we can't say 100% that Madeleine's alive, we know that there's a very good chance that she's still alive. I mean, as you've suggested, I mean, the frustrating thing, one of the hardest things for us is knowing if we'll ever actually find her. And we certainly can't stop as her parents, we can't stop until we get there.
Yes, so you just go on.
It is a bit, in some ways, like there's an element, not our whole life, but the not knowing is like a living purgatory. It's not the same as your child having been killed, and we often talk about, you know, we need to know what's happened to Madeleine, but most importantly, we need to find her and those responsible. And as parents, we can't stop what we're doing until we find Madeleine and who took her.
No, that's right, because someone I know very well, their child disappeared at sea, and within a year or two he lost at sea, and after a year or two she would have preferred to have known, even if that was negative. Do you know what I mean? Because
yeah, I know some people say I'd rather have hope than to hear that my child is no longer alive. But I disagree. I mean, I think maybe it depends how long you've been waiting, really. I guess not knowing for a couple of weeks is very different to not knowing for 4 years more. But whilst we don't know, there is still hope, and as we know from other cases of missing children who have disappeared for years and years, sometimes decades, and there's every chance that a similar situation could be the same for Madeleine. Children can disappear off the radar for such a long time and yet turn up alive. And obviously that's our hope and that's what we're working towards. And it's exhausting. I mean, we really haven't stopped for the last 4 years, and because it is only myself, Jerry and our team who are looking for Madeleine. As you know, there's been no police force looking now since July 2008. And it's hard work and it's draining, and particularly when you've got the pressure of not being able to stop because she's your child, it is very tiring. But
must be incredibly exhausting. This,
yeah.
I mean, and you've got to continue. You've got to do it, and so on. And what can you hope for as a breakthrough next? What would you like to see the police forces of the world or whatever? What would you like to happen next? I mean, what are you campaigning for?
I think the most important thing is there's been no systematic and comprehensive review of Madeline's case, and that's what we're really launching the campaign yesterday to do, and we're asking the Portuguese and British governments to undertake such a review. And in the UK, that would be standard practice in a serious crime that's unsolved. And we think, from reading the files ourselves, there are many unanswered questions. And the review would be to review all of the available evidence and really to direct a series of further inquiries that may lead to new evidence that will help us recover Madeleine and also those responsible. And it's fundamental. I don't think we can rest until that has been done.
And North Africa is one of the areas that you think will be valuable in the future in terms of investigation.
Well, I think the problem that we have, David, is we really don't know where Madeleine is, and we know that she could have been moved out of Portugal very quickly, and obviously access to North Africa makes it a possibility that she may have been moved there. We don't know, but we know there is a possibility, and therefore we have to cover that, and that's why we're reaching out really to ask your viewers really if they can help us in our search.
And that's where North Africa comes in.
That's right.
So how have your lives changed in the last 4 years? I mean, dramatically in what happened, but in your lives, in your inner selves, I mean, how are you different today than you were when the day before Madeleine was abducted?
I think it's fair to say that every aspect of our life has changed markedly. Before the 3rd of May 2007, we were a very normal, unremarkable family really, but very happy. And this has changed not only us, but our parents, siblings. It's affected all of us. It's affected what we do, our relationships with people.
I think Madeleine being missing covers part of everything we do. It's impacted in so many different ways. I think we're a lot stronger now than what we were 4 years ago, and we have moved along a little bit, and I think other families who experience traumatic episodes like this, you do get to somewhere along the recovery phase, and we can now get enjoyment in life, and we're fortunate to have 2 beautiful other children who are incredibly happy. But you know, they miss their sister as well, so I think we will hopefully...
How old are they now?
Twins are 6, and they're great. You wouldn't know, looking at them, that they've had a sibling removed in such a way.
But Madeleine's absence is tangible still in everything we do, and
Is it? Yeah.
you know, even at the most enjoyable times when we're with Sean and Emily, we're still obviously very aware that there should be another little girl there. They should have the big sister with them. And for a long time I found it very difficult to derive any enjoyment for anything, or not feel guilty about getting enjoyment from something when our daughter was still missing.
But that's marvellous. You've done that now. That you can take pleasure without being ashamed of pleasure, as it were.
I mean, I used to beat myself up quite a bit about it and feel guilty, but I now acknowledge that it's actually positive. It's a forward step really, that I am able to do that. And we know it's important for our own well-being and for Sean and Emily's well-being that we do take time out and can enjoy things and enjoy each other.
It's incredible though how an abduction like this can destroy families. There's no question of that. It's an unbelievably traumatic experience, and we were fortunate to receive incredible support both from family and friends, but also the general public, and we've had messages from many different countries, many different people, including in the Arab world as well.
And what can the book achieve? Well, first of all, the thing that we were mentioning earlier on about where in the world there may be a response to this book that goes around the world, and the programme goes around the world, and so on. What else could the book do? Well, I suppose that's the main thing.
I think there's
to provide new information.
Yes, absolutely. I think, and it's probably on 3 levels that can help. There's a general awareness of getting Madeleine's image and the age progression image. It's very important for the public to realise we're not looking for a 4-year-old girl anymore. Madeleine was 8 yesterday, and that's really important. The second thing, of course, is we've launched the campaign to get the review. And the third thing we hope is that people will look at the book as a whole, and those people who were in and around Praia da Luz will really rack their brains, or did they know anyone's there? Because there's a number of persons of interest who have not yet been identified, particularly the man who was seen carrying a child away just about 9:10 on the 3rd of May 2007. And he's been described almost identically by an Irish family who saw a man carrying a child later that evening. And we really need to identify him, because he's key, I think, to finding Madeleine.
How can people help? I mean, if they think they know who you're talking about.
Well, I think the first thing is if people could visit our website. The e-sketches are there. It's findmadeleine.com. All the information is, the key piece of information are there. They can send information to us through the website. There's an investigation at Find Madeleine. And of course, if anyone sees a child, an 8-year-old girl who they think is Madeleine, the advice is to call the local police as quickly as possible so that it can be investigated.
We'd like to ask people as well if they look really hard at the photographs of Madeleine, and particularly the age progression picture, and just ask themselves, have they seen a little girl around 8 years old who looks similar to that photograph? And as Jerry said, we've also have the sketches of suspicious people that were seen around the apartment, including the man seen by our friend carrying a child away, and all those images are actually in the book as well as on the website.
As well?
Yes. Yeah.
And so you haven't lost your faith that you'll see Madeleine again?
No, I haven't. I still truly believe, for what it's worth, in my heart, that we'll see our daughter again. But obviously we need help from as many people as possible if we're to achieve that.
Thank you both very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. And here's one more look at that picture, that impression of the way that Madeleine might be looking today. So look around and tell your local police if you see anything that could solve the mystery.